About to start our session 7, monetization psychology, and our first speaker, Claudia Fu, collaborating with Leon Xiao, Luke Clark. They will be presenting on luck and labor, a thematic analysis of players' grinding behaviors in Genshin Impact. Yeah, I guess can I have Claudia? A round of applause for Claudia.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claudia Fu, and I'm a psychology graduate student at the University of British Columbia. And my talk today is titled Luck and Labor, a Thematic Analysis of Players' Grinding Behaviors in Genshin Impact. But before we begin, this is my disclosure slide. The work that I'll be presenting today is conducted within the Center for Gambling Research, which is supported by the Government of British Columbia and the BC Lottery Corporation, but they have no role in the research program at the center, and there are no constraints on publishing. As for positionality, we are a psychology lab with our work focusing on the psychology of gambling and decision-making. We've previously conducted research on gambling-adjacent products like loot boxes and gambling streams, and we approach this topic with a gambling harm and behavioral addiction perspective. So let us begin. To start with, we are interested in the gamification of video games, which is a trend where gambling-like elements are increasingly being incorporated into video games as a way of monetization. Past prevalence studies have shown that 59 to 77% of top-grossing mobile games in the UK feature randomized rewards, which is particularly concerning when those exact same games are being marketed as appropriate for children. With this trend, researchers have also been studying the potential harmful effects of randomized rewards, mostly in terms of loot boxes and financial implication. And there's a growing body of evidence that show a linkage between loot box expenditure to problem gambling. Longitudinal studies have also supported a migration theory that loot box engagement creates a pathway for non-gamblers to initiate gambling, with these findings being further supported by replication study. Beyond the negative financial impacts, researchers have also raised ethical concerns regarding the lack of consumer protections and predatory game design features that accompany randomized rewards. These features include difficult to access or difficult to understand probability disclosures and multi-tier in-game currencies, all of which serve to distance players from the true monetary cost of an item. Together, these have the potential to hinder players' ability to make well-informed decisions and may encourage players to engage in unhealthy gaming behaviors. Previous psychological studies on this topic have focused on the involvement of real-life money, how much players are spending on loot boxes, whether the items can be sold for money. Here, we're interested in grinding, a common style of gameplay where players complete general and repetitive tasks to accumulate in-game currencies without spending real-world money. The in-game currencies can then be used to obtain virtual items with the goal of gaining progress in the game. However, players will still have to engage with the game's randomized rewards mechanics, so the chance components associated with traditional gambling remains. In terms of research, there's been some unexpected finding in the past where researchers found that players that grind for loot boxes display greater gambling harms than those who pay for them. These preliminary data support the notion that harms can arise without monetary expenditure, but it also points to a need for more research on this topic. Grinding has also been criticized as a time sink feature because the in-game tasks involved are not aimed to create meaningful progress or enjoyment, but to overcome gate-capped content and to extend the endgame. Moreover, it is difficult for players to judge the amount of time required to achieve their goals, which can result in social harms that are less quantifiable than financial harms, such as opportunity costs through the overinvestment of time. That brings us to our project here. Our aim was to get a qualitative account of players' engagement with the grinding mechanics in Genshin Impact. To do so, we surveyed 237 undergraduate students all of which were active players that have played the game in the past 12 months. As for demographics breakdown, 69% of our participants identify as women, 70% were East Asians, and data collection was conducted from October 2023 to April 2024. And so we asked participants this prompt. Imagine you have spent 2 weeks grinding credits to summon a character you're excited about. How does that make you feel, and does this change the way in which you play the game at all? All the participants answered to this prompt in text with no word limit constraints. The data was then analyzed with thematic analysis. A team of 3 researchers looked at the data independently to identify potential themes. The research team then discussed and revised the coding schedule until they reached a consensus. The final results are presented here, with 4 main themes and 15 sub-themes identified, and we'll go over each of them. The first main theme is grinding-related evaluations. These 5 sub-themes encompass different points of evaluation players take into account when deciding on their grinding approach. The first one being financial cost. As we know, items in Genshin can be quite expensive, and so participants may consider whether it's worthwhile or affordable to spend money on the item. The second sub-theme is time commitment. Grinding is time-intensive, and participants may consider whether they have the time to grind during the banner events and whether the reward justifies the time commitment required to get the item for free. The third sub-theme here is effort requirement. Grinding was described as an effortful and laborious activity, especially to players who do not play in that style. On the opposite side, if players usually grind for rewards that they're free-to-play players, they may perceive a lower level of effort required. And the fourth sub-theme here is emotional investment. While players do not directly discuss investing emotions, it's implied that grinding and summoning are emotionally intensive experience, and that they may experience things like hopes and anxieties in anticipation to summoning, and burnouts and exhaustions from grinding. The last sub-theme here is reward value assessment. The likelihood and willingness of players to grind were also based on how much value they attach to those items. Participants can be quite careful and selective in how they choose to spend the resources, and so they may wait for reruns than to spend immediately to get another similar items. The second main theme here is emotions. Participants expressed how grinding and summoning made them feel as a direct response to the prompt. The first one being positive emotions such as excitement and happiness when receiving the item, a sense of pride, accomplishment, and satisfaction from achieving the goals and seeing the fruit of the labor, or feelings like a rush or thrill similar to gambling. For negative emotions, participants have expressed feelings of anxiety and nervousness stemming from the reward uncertainty, as well as tiredness and boredom from grinding. For neutral emotions, some participants have expressed a sense of apathy, of feeling nothing due to habituation. And for conditional sentiments, participants express that their feeling will be dependent on another factor, such as how they have approached grinding and summoning. For example, they will feel positive if they manage to not spend any money, or if they have played in a way that did not infringe on their daily lives or responsibilities. The last sub-theme is complex emotion, where participants describe different combinations of emotions, sort of comparable to an emotional journey. For example, participants describe being bored or exhausted while grinding, but excited the second after they get the character. Or on the opposite side, where participants initially feel proud, but then they get a sense of emptiness or loss of purpose after they get the character. The third main theme here is game design, which depicts how players engage with different features within the game. The first sub-theme is that gacha system is a game of chance, and players have to engage with the chance elements to obtain or upgrade playable in-game items. Some players describe performing rituals before summoning for luck, similar to ritualistic behavior that we'll see in gamblers or athletes. The second sub-theme is pity timer and some mechanics. The pity timer mechanics is seen as a consolation prize, but also as a point of strategizing for players. Interestingly, it also affects the perception of a failed summoning attempt, that it is inevitable and it is a stepping stone in terms of building pity counts. The third subtheme is the cyclical nature of reward system. Event banners are time limited with a short availability with no clear information as to when the banners will return. For some players, this can create a sense of urgency and a fear of missing out, which can lead to increased playtime. The last subtheme is the tension between paying versus grinding. Although, with this prompt, players are grinding to get the items for free. Because of how hard it can be, there's still a constant consideration or temptation to pay in addition to grinding. The last main theme here is gameplay styles. It refers to a type of behaviors that players engage in while grinding, and it can be due to the factors mentioned in previous themes or based on individual preferences. The first subtheme here is on the adaptive aspect, where grinding may encourage players to engage in behaviors that are beneficial, such as engaging in social interactions more frequently, like discussing the games with friends, playing co-op. Players have described safeguards that they implemented to protect themselves from negative outcomes, where they would actively monitor the mental health and time management, not to let the gameplay affect their home and school life. These safeguards include taking a break when they need to, or playing more to hoard resources when they have the time to do so. However, some players may also engage in maladaptive behavior while grinding. Participants acknowledge that their playstyles were unhealthy and may result in negative consequences to varying degrees. On the lighter side of things, participants may describe that as they play to grind, they would do it as efficiently as possible, and to do so, they would skip over aspects of the game that they like, making the game less enjoyable and feeling like a chore. In more serious cases, participants describe problematic behaviors, such as neglecting their daily life responsibilities, so they can spend more time playing. That brings us to our discussion points. Our data show that grinding is a multifaceted experience with a high degree of individual differences. Players can experience a range of positive and negative psychological outcomes. We also see that harms can occur without the involvement of real-life money, and game design decisions can contribute to harmful gameplay styles. As such, safe and responsible game design should consider beyond monetization. In terms of study methods, video games mechanics are becoming increasingly complicated. Studying player behaviors on a game-to-game basis increases the data's richness, and it allows us to tease the mechanics apart to gain a better understanding of the impacts on players. Thank you for listening to my talk, and feel free to reach out to me with questions, and you can follow our research at the lab website.
Okay, beautiful presentation. Do we have questions for Claudia? Right. We'll get to Chanel first.
Hello, thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'm just wondering something about the people you interview. Just a short question, because I realized that you have interviewed mostly women and those from East Asia, but not all women and not all from East Asia. So I'm just wondering, will this cause a kind of bias in the studies, or why in other ways you don't just interview East Asian women only?
So the way that we collected data was it's part of a bigger survey, and this study was conducted in a Canadian university. So it's undergraduate students who participate in the survey to get extra credits for their class. The only inclusion criteria that we included is that they're active players that have played the game in the past 12 months, and we do not select participants based on demographic criteria. The description here is mostly for giving context as to how our results can be generalized.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that their ethnicity and gender has kind of affected their grinding behavior in some ways?
I don't have enough information in our data to make any inferences to that. But I would say, compared to a general study sample that we'll see in our department, this is fairly typical in terms of like percentage of women participants, and also East Asian participants. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm pretty sure we still have time. Any more questions for Claudia? Right, Callum.
What's the way to put this? So when players are like discussing their grinding habits or mechanics, are they talking about like how much do they conceptualize it in terms of like concrete units of time versus having just like feeling, like having this feeling, right? Just because looking at like students, right?
Yeah.
Students tend to have this like interesting relationship with their time, right?
Yeah. I would say like we do have data on like the estimation of how much time they spend on the game. It's more quantitative data that we're not presenting here. But in terms of this prompt and how they respond to it, some participants talk about like, in terms of like grinding, it's time intensive. Like you need to spend a lot of time to play the game, active playing time to, you know, get to a character. And participants have mentioned that the 2 weeks that we mentioned here may not be enough. Like there's participants talking about how they would need to grind for 5 weeks just to get the character that they want. Yeah.
I got it.
Right.
So first of all, thank you for your interesting research and presentation. So actually my question is regarding the methodology and data analysis part. So you mentioned that finally 5 things are derived from like your team's coding process. So actually I'm curious, like, so basically in detail, how did you like derive the 5 things from those coding? Because maybe if we like disseminate this survey to another group of people, they may answer different things and we may have a completely independent coding process. So are there any like relevant theories applied for you to determine or derive or summarize these 5 main things?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In terms of these main themes, so like the things like emotions, that's very obviously like a response to a prompt when we ask them how grinding makes them feel, where they express their emotion. And we'll definitely acknowledge like our potential biases as gambling researchers, right? Like we might look for similarities between like traditional gambling to the gacha system and how they engage with the gacha system. In terms of coding, the research team involved is like myself, my supervisor as well as Leon, so we have a varying degree of like familiarity with the games and also areas of expertise. But yeah, like I completely agree that, you know, if it's other researchers looking at the data, they may have come up with like different ideas as well. Yeah.
We still have time for a couple more questions, if anyone have. Okay, I'll take my privilege as the chair. I have an annoying question, a big question, I guess, because I think, well, your talk was really interesting, and I think you talk about like grinding as a highly individual kind of activity, but still it could contribute to kind of harmful gaming experiences. I wonder, this might not be, you know, no one has the answer for this question, but I wonder if you have any thinking about how can we avoid this type of harm from like a design perspective or regulatory perspective?
Yeah, that's also a question that I've been thinking. I don't have a good question for you, but I think we're gonna have some like topics on psycho educations, so that would be interesting to hear what they have to say. But just thinking about things that we sort of identified through our data set, there are players that manage to engage with these mechanics in a quite healthy way. In terms of thinking about like time management is a big one. You know, grinding, time sync features, people sort of lose track of time while they're playing, so being active and involved in thinking about how much time you're spending on the game and actively thinking about other responsibilities in your life would be definitely a good way to think about it. Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Yeah, I guess a round of applause for Claudia.
Thank you.